When I was 15 and living in Japan, I think I was almost abducted. My friend, who I will call him, and I went shopping out in the city and casually walked the streets that day. Leaning against a building was a foreign man who, upon seeing us walk by, started to smile charmingly and greet us. The man told us how beautiful we were and how he thought we would love all of the things inside his store. We continued to walk and blush as he offered to buy us lunch after we were done shopping with him. Although he was nice, Em and I were starting to get weird vibes from him, but we tried to be polite. The guy stepped in between us, put his arms around each of our shoulders, and started to lead us down the street. He was boisterous as he talked and reassured us his shop was just a little further. He was always trying to appear friendly with a smile on his face, but he was constantly interrupting us when we tried to speak up about having somewhere else to be. The man kept a firm grip on our shoulders, and anytime I tried to politely wriggle away from him, he would pull me in closer. After twisting us through the city, he takes us around a corner, and I see a black car with two of its doors open on the driver's side and about 4 men standing around it. When they see us coming up, they each perk up and give each other looks. Em and I stopped dead in our tracks and were no longer smiling or trying to be nice. It just got real. The man with us continues to smile and nudges us forward, way more aggressively now. All of the men standing at the car are super aware of us, staring anxiously with wide eyes as we keep getting pushed closer to them. In a simultaneous second, Em and I rip ourselves from the man's grip and begin sprinting in the opposite direction back where we came from. We don't stop running and my chest is burning, but we keep on going. Finally, we reach a restaurant and slip through the door. Once we finally caught our breath and realized he wasn't coming for us, we started to calm down. I'm almost 30 now, but I remember all of that so vividly, especially the look on the faces of those men when we came around the corner. They were waiting for us. When I was 14, I lived down the street from a Walgreens, and I would walk there to buy candy or makeup maybe once or twice a week after school. It was less than a 10-minute walk, and I mostly felt safe, although at that age we all feel invincible. One day, standing in line waiting to pay for my goods, I felt something tickle my back. I've always had long hair and figured it was a random loose strand, so I just ignored it. Then the random tickle turned into something solid, and I felt a grip on my bra. Like full on, someone is holding the back strap hooks of my bra in their hand. I made a noise, rushed forward, and turned around to see a dude standing behind me. I started to ask, "What the hell?" But he cut me off and said,
"Someone is supposed to teach you how to use those things."
I was super confused, so naturally I said, "Huh?"
"Your bra. Don't you have someone to teach you how to put those things on?"
I reached back and felt that my bra was above the back of my shirt, and apparently the hooks weren't fully aligned or something, but I was still confused. "Okay," I said, super creeped out at this point.
"Well, you're walking around like a dog in heat. At least fix your bra or let me do it for you."
Okie dokie. I faced forward and ignored him, paid for my candy and lip gloss, and then left. Halfway to my house, a car pulled up beside me, and lo and behold, it's him.
"Hey, hop in. I'll give you a ride,"
he called out through the passenger window. "I'm good, thanks. I'm almost home," I said back while speeding up my pace.
"No, come on. It's okay,"
he called back, and at this point he sort of pulled up and angled his car so that he was nearly on the sidewalk. No thanks," I yelled back at him before running to the other side of the street. I kept on my same walking pace, but I was freaking out. I heard his engine revving up behind me, turned to see his car coming towards me, and I just ran until I reached my house. Probably not smart, but I ran inside and locked the doors and screamed for my older brother that some creeper was outside trying to get me in their car. My brother ran outside, and thankfully the dude took off. After that happened, I never walked to Walgreens again alone. So this story has a lot of build-up. So I met this friend online the summer before my junior year of high school. I was 16. His name was Flip. We clicked pretty much instantly. Our senses of humor matched up and I felt like we were really good friends. He was a guy, I a girl, but I never really held romantic feelings for him. Also, I was in a relationship. When I was 16, he was 19. I could tell he had romantic feelings for me and he let me know about 6 months into our friendship that he loved me. We didn't really have a stable friendship as he flipped out a lot and would go extended amounts of time without talking to me. He told me it was because he couldn't bear to talk to me knowing we can't be together, because I was dating someone else. But I now know that it was more of a control thing and he wanted to stop talking to me to make me feel like I'm missing something. He really hated women, like really disliked women and felt like most of them are all whores. He told me he felt like I was different though, that I was the only true woman he's ever met. Really red flag shit. I was young and didn't really think much of it at the time. Our friendship was only online, iMessaging and FaceTiming. Now, whenever he went on these tangents where he would abruptly stop talking to me, he would go on Twitter and make offensive demonizing tweets about me to people. Like awful stuff. When he came back, I just ignored that stuff because he would always go back to being funny and nice to me. I'm building up to the first time we met in real life, so hang in there with me. So he also had a habit of lashing out at people, taking revenge on people, and just making people feel like shit for fun. Another red flag. But I thought I was special and thought that he really cared about me and he would never do anything like that to me. I remember leading up to my 18th birthday, him being 21 now. He said to me,
"When you're 18, you're sending me nudes. You don't get to say no."
I brushed it off because I knew I wouldn't, but yeah, notice there's just this element of him wanting to dominate. Anyway, fast forward to 2 years later. I'm now 18, freshman in college. In October, I broke up with my boyfriend and Flip took that as an opportunity. He would tell me he couldn't bear not seeing me and that basically we have to meet or it's all over. Now, I didn't really have romantic feelings for him. My love for him was platonic, but I figured I'll try the romance. I'll try to love him romantically. I couldn't lose him. So I impulsively bought a plane ticket to where he lives in December. My parents had no idea and to this day still don't. I was going to go away on a Friday and come back on a Monday. The college I go to school in is in a city with an airport, so it was easy to just Uber to the airport. The romance that I'm trying to project feels real and I genuinely felt like I loved him romantically. I was finally going to meet the guy I loved. Now, leading up to the flight, about 1 to 2 weeks before, I started getting cold feet. I was questioning my feelings and if they were even real, and started getting along with a guy in a neighboring university. I started catching feelings for him and I kissed him a day before my flight. At that point, I had already decided that I didn't want to pursue Flip romantically and I figured, hey, we've been friends for 2 years. When I get there, I'll tell him that I only want to stay friends. Yeah, he'll be upset, but I'm sure our friendship is worth more than that and we'll be able to have a great time together as friends. How damn naive I was. I decided to go on the trip anyway, thinking that maybe seeing him would reignite that fire. Upon arrival, I realized that I didn't love him and I was no longer attracted to him. Regardless though, he was a close friend of mine for a very long time, and whether I felt a romantic connection or not, I wanted to meet him for the sake of meeting him, just how I'd want to meet any internet friend. So it's time for the flight. It's very early. I remember sitting on the plane contemplating walking out. I really just wanted to leave and not return. I really should have listened to my gut. I arrive and I go outside of the terminal. I see him sitting in his car just staring at me, like a very malicious, piercing stare. After a few moments, he gets out of the car. He looks different. It's very strange because we've FaceTimed before and I've seen pictures of him, but he just looks different somehow, kind of creepier. We hug and sit in the car and it's awkward. I feel awkward. We make small talk and awkward jokes and in that moment I wanted to go back to my dorm. We go back to his apartment and we go up to his room. We smoke some weed and I lay down on his bed to sleep. When I wake up, he's spooning me and trying to fondle me. I take his hands off of me and tell him to stop, Then I sit up and basically unload about how I don't want him romantically and only as a friend. He just started crying and begging me to tell him that I love him. I tell him I can't do that. He then stands up, stops crying, goes to the bathroom, and starts lighting stuff on fire. It smells like burning paper in the bedroom now. He comes out normally and just sits on his computer and starts playing games without talking to me at all. Now, the rest of the trip is just like a combination of him being kind and normal to him being completely evil. Here's some of the things he's done and said throughout the 3 days. He made jokes about me dying, would pretend to hit me and laugh as I flinched, told me he almost sent a snap of me to my mom with the geotag of his town so that I would get in trouble, told me he almost made me sleep in his car one night, told me that one night while I was sleeping he walked over to me and started farting on me, which this one is just straight up gross. Kept telling me to shut the hell up when I would speak or ask questions, did it multiple times in front of his roommates too. Was trying to fill me up in bed while I pushed his hands away, and he would always keep trying and would say things like, "I know you want it, you're just holding back." Would call me an idiot when I would ask questions. He served me spaghetti and told me he purposely used the moldy spaghetti sauce hoping I would get sick. Told me that he was gonna make me miss my flight home. Said he was planning to drive in the opposite direction of the airport and dropping me off in the middle of nowhere. So basically I kept my cool, and when he would tell me these things I would nod and agree and laugh with him. I was scared shitless and I wanted nothing more than to leave. So I kinda keep it cool and spend my time trying not to upset him. Monday rolls around and my flight isn't till 8 p.m. Around 11 a.m. he goes downstairs to leave, and in that time I pack my bag and leave without him knowing. My plan of action is to run to the nearest shopping plaza and Uber to the airport from there. I wasn't about to Uber from his house. I'm almost to the end of the street feeling free when I feel 2 arms come up from behind me and wrap around me. What do you know? It's him and he's hugging me. He mumbles something into my ear and then turns around and sprints back down to his apartment. I ran to the shopping plaza, called an Uber, and got it. I felt so much relief in that moment. I felt like I was free. I waited at the airport with nothing to do for 8 hours, but it was better than being with him. I always look back and I feel like an idiot. Like I should have gone to a hotel and I should have probably left, but I'm a broke college kid, and I was already scared shitless being here without my parents' knowledge. After I left, I blocked him on every social media outlet that I have, including LinkedIn. He still has tried to contact me regularly for 4 months, but luckily I never gave him my address or anything. So hopefully I'll never hear back from him ever again. My parents live in some very forested area in southern France, pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and when I say in, I say that we have to go through a kilometer of dirt road to get to our house. I spend most of my year in some rainy city up north, so I try to enjoy the nature and stuff whenever I come by for holidays. And because it's so hot during the day and I'm not afraid of the darker animals, I often walk around at night. Now, mind you that even though I would walk on small paths in the middle of the forest, I had no light. First because I knew the forest and surrounding area like the back of my hand, but also because I didn't want to meet sketchy people at night in the forest. So whenever I would go out, I would take my big black mantle reaching down to the ankles, black boots, black gloves, black hat, and sunglasses so I could duck in the vegetation and remain virtually invisible if someone approached. So here I was in the middle of the summer taking a nice little walk on a small path in the forest in slightly hilly terrain at around 1 a.m. The weather was clear and I could easily see my surroundings, and since we were far away from major cities, you can see the stars pretty well in such clear weather. So I looked up to try and see some stars through the leaves going uphill. At some point there was a sharp turn, thick vegetation masking the rest of the path, so I didn't notice the headlight coming towards me. And of course, since I didn't have any light, the incoming cyclist almost crashed into me when he turned, and basically rammed right into the vegetation trying to avoid me. I was startled, but just froze and stared at him through the sunglasses while he got a hold of his bike and stood back up facing me. He was clearly larger and more muscular than I am, yet he looked completely terrified. Probably because I was dressed in a very sketchy way and had no light. Now, for some reason I was quite amused by the fact that someone like him could be afraid by the feeble me. So I just grinned without saying a word and chuckled a bit. Now he stared at me with an even more terrified expression than before and got back on his bike in a haste, still looking toward me. So I realized how creepy what I just did was, freaked out a bit, and decided I had to say something normal to make him calm down or something. In the end, I unintentionally did something even creepier. I stopped chuckling and smiling all at once when he got on his bike and said in a neutral voice, "Lovely night, isn't it?" That was the first normal thing that came through my mind, and for some reason I just blurted it out just like that. Of course, he didn't even answer and rode off pretty fast, and I just stood there looking at him drive away before noticing that his white plastic bottle had fallen off his bike, so I yell, "Hey, wait up!" after him, but he's more or less out of range already. Forests soak up sounds pretty well, so maybe he just heard me yelling. Now, here's the thing. As I said, I know the woods like the back of my hand, so I know that unless he wanted to take small and practical paths that would take him hours to get anywhere, he would come back on the main path he was on, and said path had at some point a series of sharp turns, including the one in which I had met the man. When you got past those turns, you had the impression that you had turned right, whereas you actually turned around. So if I was to cut through the woods, I could be at the spot he would presumably be at in about 15 minutes, if he was fast, and 5 minutes to give him his bottle back. So I just left the bottle in the middle of the road and went back home after going on the path I was on again. I wonder what his reaction was when he found the bottle in the middle of the road, as unless he properly looked at a map before, he would have had the impression that I somehow teleported ahead of him or ran faster than he could ride. Now that all is said and done, I'm glad he was a rather normal person. I'm just sorry that I had to be his let's not meet. I can't imagine what was going through his head. This is one of the most scarring encounters I've ever experienced in my life. So this took place in July, so almost 2 months ago. My family rented this nice one-story house in the outskirts of a sea town, and since it was on the side of a huge hill, we got a breathtaking sight of the sea. The house was a bit isolated from the other buildings of the residential area since it was not directly on the street but surrounded by trees. The master bedroom was quite small, with the king-size bed at the center and a big closet in front of it. The window directly on the backyard. The backyard where we hung our clothes to dry had a ridiculously low and easy to climb fence which went directly into the woods. When my brothers were there, we would climb out of the window and into the woods just to feel like kids again. It was really hot, which I can't stand, so I always left every window in the house open to let air in. My brothers and dad couldn't be there because they had to work during weekdays, so it was just me and my mom. My grandma instead stayed in a hotel in the center of the town. I was on my period for a whole week and I didn't feel like going to the beach. So my mom agreed to leave me home alone so that she could go with my grandma. Of course, I didn't want to stay alone, so I called a close friend of mine who happened to stay in that same town for the holidays. We'll call him Ray. So he came over, bringing some weed, and I was really excited to try it since I'd never smoked weed or pot or anything like that. We were staying on the balcony enjoying our smoke and the view, chatting quietly when I heard a soft crashing sound, as if someone fell on one of the many carpets we had there. When I mentioned it, Ray laughed it off, saying that I'm hearing things and that's normal with drugs. But I was pretty sure of my hearing, which never fails and it's exceedingly good if I must say. So he replied, "Maybe it's just your cat." We both knew that I couldn't bring my cat on vacation with me and that it had to stay at my hometown. But we searched for it anyway, laughing like idiots. Ray opened the kitchen cupboard, screaming, "I bet you I can find the cat way before you do." I went into the master bedroom and opened the closet, giggling something like, "Here kitty, come out now, stop hiding." Then I kneeled and looked under the bed. There was a dude under the bed laying on the ground and staring at me all wide-eyed. I'm pretty sure in that moment time stopped, as well as my heart. I have no idea what kept me from screaming at the top of my lungs, but I got up, ran out of the room, and shut the door behind me. My mind was trying to process what I'd just seen. I never let go of the handle. I think my knuckles turned white at some point. Ray started giggling, but he went dead serious as he looked at me. I told him there was a guy under my mom's bed. He thought I was hallucinating and trying to joke about it, but I grabbed my phone and dialed my mom's number. Later on, he told me that he had understood I was serious only when he saw my hands shaking and my fingers having a hard time dialing. When my mom picked up the phone, I sounded so cold and controlled that it gives me chills whenever I think about it. I told her that I was with Ray and that we had found an intruder. My mom arrived in the span of 10 minutes, I think, and not much long after, the cops arrived too. It was agony. They didn't find anyone, of course, but my mom noticed a pair of panties missing from the clothes hanging out. But aside from that, there were no other sign of intrusion. The cops had a hard time believing us because of the smell of weed. We never heard anything else about the case. I'm sure I wasn't hallucinating because he was there and I remember every single detail of his face and how he held his breath. Me and Ray sometimes joke about it, but I'm pretty sure he was creeped out too. Needless to say, I don't keep my windows open anymore if there isn't any screening, and neither should anyone else. You never know what's out there. This just happened yesterday. For some background, I work at a local bakery that specializes in fresh-baked pastries and breads. We're insanely busy, especially now that we're getting closer to fall and the holidays. We have a lot of older people come in, and I've definitely had some strange interactions with older men, but nothing like this. I was only a few hours into my shift. We had been slammed all morning, and unfortunately I was on the front counter. I was getting pretty exhausted with interacting with customers, but my lunch was just around the corner, so I wasn't too stressed. An older man comes in with who I assume was his mother. Right off the bat, my stomach drops when I see him, but seeing as how I was the only one available at the time, I shook it off and greeted him. He sort of just stared at me, and then began sounding off his questions.
What's your darkest bread? Do you have sour rye?
Etc. The questions weren't strange, but every time I would answer him, he would just give me that damn stare and look me up and down. He decided on a few loaves and seemed offended when I asked him if he wanted them sliced, so I just rolled my eyes and bagged them up. Whatever, just get out of my restaurant already, right? At the time, a coworker was actually in line behind him waiting to get food on his day off. Our barista guy walked over to talk to him as nothing else was going on, so I immediately felt more comfortable. Wrong.
You're a really pretty girl,
he said, staring down at me. Oh great, here it comes. Now I have to awkwardly finish ringing him up and then hope he doesn't hold me hostage at the register. Both of my coworkers are now eyeing the guy, ready to step in if he tried to flirt with me. Instead, he made a motion towards his ears while staring at mine, and then made a finger gun at me, holding it up towards my ears.
Whenever I see those, I want to stuff a barrel through them and empty a magazine. Mind if I try?
We all three stood there in shock, just staring at him. I felt the color drain from my face. The woman he came in with was laughing, covering her face. He then gave an awkward chuckle and said,
Oh, I might hit you if I do that. That might be bad.
And then they left. I watched them get into their truck, and for a few minutes he just sat there waving at me. I went to the back and told my manager, and she was furious. She went outside to find him, but he was already gone. My other two coworkers came into the back to check on me and make sure I was okay, and then they hung around up front to make sure he didn't come back. While I was on my lunch, they said they saw a truck that looked like his stop in the front of the store, and then it sped off when one of them started going out front. So while they weren't sure, it was pretty suspicious. Thankfully, the guy never came back during the rest of my time working there. I am a petite, soft-spoken 19-year-old girl and was taking summer classes at a community college this summer. One of the classes I took was public speaking, which met Tuesdays and Thursdays. This guy, I don't even know his name, was immediately one of those kids. You know, angry young man who makes no effort in school and blasts Limp Bizkit. He really did this. To get from our classroom that was on the second floor, you had to go down a hallway, down a stairwell to the first floor, through the main lobby and out the sliding doors. He started waiting for me after class and following me all the way down this route to my car. It didn't matter if I pretended to be on the phone, had both earbuds in, and kept my head down. Literally power walked away from him and gave him bare minimum responses. He would wait for me, follow me / try to walk with me, and the whole way be talking to me and asking me questions. Like asking me about each of the cars I drove to the school, since my family has to share cars. Even after I subtly dropped that I had a boyfriend, he continued to do these things. So he definitely knows my car. I got a very bad feeling after a while of this happening and told the class's professor. She immediately took it seriously, notified campus security, and told me to always stay after class so she could walk me to my car. However, true to form, the guy stopped showing up to class for at least 2 or so weeks. So I thought it was fine and that the crisis was averted, and it was, until one day he showed up to class again. As soon as I saw him enter the room, my heart dropped. During the class, I slipped a note to my professor telling her, "He's the kid in the blue shirt," and she told me to hang around after class. I did, and so did the guy, before he tried to talk to the professor about why he should pass the class despite never showing up or doing the work. The professor asked me and the other girl to wait in the hall. From the hall, we could hear him yelling aggressively at the professor. He eventually left and came out into the hallway we were waiting in and pointed at me and said,
"Wait for me."
Mind you, I have no idea who this kid is. I instantly got the heebie-jeebies and rushed back into the room to tell the professor, who was equally creeped out. Having overheard our conversation, the other female student came back into the room approximately 10 minutes later and told me and the professor that the guy was just standing in the hall, waiting for me. The professor called campus security and phoned the front desk multiple times, but she received no responses. So we took it into our own hands and came up with the plan to leave the classroom together, pretending to be in a very deep conversation with each other, walk past the guy without even looking at him, and walk down to the stairwell to the main lobby. His eyes sunk right into us as we passed him, and when we entered the stairwell, he stood up and followed us. The professor and I exchanged looks of terror, but we kept our cool, stopping at the main desk in the lobby and pretending to converse with the secretary. The guy passed us, still staring at us, and walked out of the sliding doors where he was out of our field of vision. We literally had to track down the campus security ourselves and tell them everything that had happened, and my professor was furious. After we saw security camera footage of him lurking around, she contacted the local police because she and I both had a very strong gut feeling that this kid was not right and that we weren't safe around him. So that public speaking class was from 3 to 5 p.m. and I had another class from 6 to 8 p.m. So I would usually drive to Wawa or something in that hour gap. However, there was no way in hell I was going anywhere because I knew this guy was waiting for me to do so. For over an hour, we tried to figure out who the hell this kid was. None of us knew his name because he literally never came to class. There weren't photo IDs next to the class roster and approximately half of the original class stopped showing up. So we couldn't use a process of elimination. All we had was the security footage of him. I was escorted to and from my next class and to my car at the end of the night. The security officer asked me to point out my car, and when I did, he said, "Oh wow, so he was parked right next to you the whole time." Confused, I asked what he meant, and he told me that he had been watching more security footage and the guy got in the car parked right next to me, waited in there for a really long time, and then eventually left. The thing is, I knew for a fact that I hadn't parked next to anyone when I arrived at the school because the lot was practically empty since it was summer. After finally getting home that night, local police did drive-bys of my home all night long and a well check. When I returned to the school 2 days later for my Thursday classes, I was informed of chilling information. Footage showed him waiting for me in his car on Tuesday after our shared class, which I had already been told. But it also showed him coming back to the parking lot at 8 p.m. when my last class got out and sitting in his car. I never told him about my schedule or any of the other classes I was taking. This whole time, my public speaking professor was filing reports, making complaints against the school for their incompetence, and even got a lawyer because she felt so uneasy about the kid that if he showed up again, she would walk out. I was in contact with the president of the entire college, the director of security of the entire college, and the police for days. They told me that he was banned from campus and everyone was on watch for him, and that if he was spotted, he would be asked to leave. Until the director of campus security called me and told me that he identified the kid and talked to him. And he told me that the guy, and I quote, just wanted to be my friend, and told me that whatever I was doing with the guy probably made him think I was flirting with him. All of my professors were absolutely furious and excused me from physically attending class for the rest of the whole semester. I'm still always on edge all the time knowing that he knows what cars I drive, and for all I know, he could have followed me home. To this day, I still don't know his name, and I hope I never have to learn it.